I'm going to be sharing with you in this lecture what I believe to be some of the most important knowledge and wisdom that I believe every single human being really needs to know. Because the thing is that many people, what they do, whether they realize it or not, what they're doing is that they're actually taking 2 steps forward in their life, and then they're taking 2 steps back. And then they get stuck in this loop. And their consciousness gets stuck in a loop. It's almost as if like they've sold their soul. And the thing is that when you live life from a place of, selling your soul, what happens is that you think you're making all this progress. You think that you're creating all this abundance or whatever it is in your life. But the truth of the matter is that when you're not really coming from a powerful foundation of understanding the truth of how to move through life while being connected to the sovereignty of who you are, what happens is that once again, you sort of, and look, I'm going to share with you later in this lecture how, anything that I say in this lecture is not an attack. So it's just here to give you the practical knowledge. But anyways, I'll just say it anyways to start off. But what I want to share with you is that we can get into these loops where we think that we're doing so much, we're progressing, we're pushing through all this fear, we're pushing through, and then we think that we're making all this progress, and then it falls apart. The ego blows it up. It's not actually sustainable. It never is when you come from the wrong foundation. See, when you come from the wrong foundation, it's always going to fall apart. Always. It never can't fall apart, which is a double negative, which means that it has to fall apart. It simply has to. And so to make sure that you don't get yourself into a situation like that, there's many things that you can be conscious of. And so we're going to be discussing that in this lecture. So let's just get right into it. All right. Now, I just want to note a few things as we go into this lecture. Number one, I am just a human being stepping into the role of a teacher. That's it. So I am a teacher in this, in this lecture here, but I'm just playing a role. Okay? And I'm only sharing what I have proven to be true in my direct experience. And I say that because I want you to be able to take what you really can from this lecture into your life. And I don't want anything that I say or the way that I say it to stop you from integrating it into who you are. I don't want anything that I say to trigger you necessarily. But if it does trigger you, then I'll share with you what to do with that in a moment. But the intention here is to help you get exactly what you need to actually move forward in your life. And if anything that I say doesn't assist in that process, if it doesn't support you in that process, you're completely safe to disregard it completely disregard it, or disagree with it, or whatever you need to do to not allow that to come into your field. And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about in this lecture, is how to have that keen discernment, how to have that keen awareness, how to be aware enough to move through life, to have that sense of, I'm in control of my reality. I'm in control of everything that's happening. And things happen because I say that they're going to happen in that way. Things don't happen by coincidence. And see, when I say something like that, I can understand how there might be many objections. When I say a statement like, oh, there are no coincidences, or you create everything in your life, I can already sense that there's going to be a lot of objections to that. Which is why I encourage you to have an open mind. I encourage you to not get too debatey, if that makes sense, about what I'm sharing here, because this isn't about debate, and this isn't about right or wrong. This isn't about me convincing you. I'm not trying to be right. I don't really care about being right. I don't really ultimately care about being right. I don't want to be right. I want to be right enough to be in the reality that I prefer, but not so right where I'm trying to prove you wrong. I don't care about proving anybody wrong. And I'm not here to have debates. I'm not here to debate about anything. I'm just here to share with you practical gnosis and knowledge and wisdom, and to share with you certain things that I've learned, and to, in the hopes of making it so that you don't have to make the same mistakes that I did. So you don't have to make those same mistakes, right? Because you can go on your own, and I encourage you to do everything on your own, ultimately speaking, to do everything in your own space. But really what I'm trying to share is something that I've learned along my journey, certain things that can help you to manifest what you truly want, and in a way that's sustainable, in a way that's actually sustainable. Because if it's not sustainable and it falls apart, did you really get anything? Did you really manifest anything that you wanted if it just falls apart? Not really. So let's just carry on here. So as I was saying a second ago, this lecture is not about getting into debate of right and wrong. That's not what this is about. If you're noticing that as I'm sharing something in this lecture, that you start to get into an energy of wanting to make it about being right or wrong, or he's right or he's wrong, and I'm correct, and or it's or you feel the need to post a comment about some hypothetical situation, about whatever case. It's oh, but what about this? It's hard to give examples, but basically anything that is not practically helping you to either, number one, step into a state of being that you prefer, or to help you manifest physically what you want from that state of being. In some places, in some, spiritual videos or whatever, in the spiritual community, they talk about assuming the wish fulfilled. And I never really resonated with that communication, but it's really, ultimately the one truth. The one truth, right? So, it's not about right or wrong. I'm not here to give you any. I'm not here to be right. And I know that I'm, sharing a lot of notes here before we get started, but I really do think that it's so critical that I do share this with you before we get into this lecture here, because unless I kind of prepare you in this way, it can be very easy to get into all sorts of debates and arguments, and it's that doesn't do anything. It doesn't help anybody. You know what I mean? It doesn't actually ground you into existence, into actual existence. And of course, there's many conceptions about what that is. Again, that's kind of something that can bring up certain topics of how do you know what actual existence is, right? Who are you to share with us, share with me what actual existence is? How do you know? All these types of questions, right? So again, I'm just stepping into the role of a teacher. You can do the same thing too. I'm not special ultimately, but I'm kind of choosing to play this role. So what I'm trying to do here is to set the intention to share with you that this is about gaining practical spiritual knowledge that you can use in your daily life, no matter what you do. No matter what you do. Okay? No matter what you do, no matter who you are, what your role is in the world, who you want to be, what you want to do, whatever you do in life, this is about helping you to achieve that state of being and frequency and being in that state that you desire to be with whatever it is that you do. That's ultimately the goal here. And if it's not helping you to get to that, then dismiss it. I encourage you to dismiss it completely. Get triggered even if you have to, but then don't get stuck there, But get triggered, disagree, and then you get back into the space that you want to be in. Take control of your space here. That's ultimately what we're trying to do here in this lecture, is to bring you to a space of being in control of your space once again. I think that that's a lost art that many people have forgotten. How to take control of your space. How to merge the spiritual dimension with the physical dimension and bring it back into one energy. Because there's no separation between these two forces, ultimately speaking. That separation is an illusion. Now, of course, I'm not saying to not have boundaries. I'm not saying to not have clear definitions of what you prefer to have in your life, what you don't prefer to have, and who you allow into your space and who you do not allow into your space. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I am saying, though, is that we are one. We are one consciousness. And it's about knowing that, but at the same time, though, taking control of your space as an individual being. Right? Because you can be aware that you're one consciousness, but then also what most people do is they sacrifice their individuality. They sacrifice their individuality. And that's kind of what I want to share with you in this lecture as well, is how to bring back that connection to your individuality while at the same time being conscious of the oneness. Okay, so this is not about necessarily just being spiritual or just how to manifest your reality. This is about mastering the entire realm of what it means to be a human being. Okay, really they should call it being human. But we'll leave that there. So another thing that I want to share with you before we get into this, and I know that this is a lot of preparation, but again, I believe that this is highly important to be able to give you the practical gnosis and expectations. I mean, to give you the practical gnosis, the knowledge and the spiritual knowledge that you need. I think that it's important to give you the foundation of how I'm going to be communicating the role that I'm stepping into, how you can make sure that if there's certain triggers that have come up for you in your space, how to deal with those, how to understand that you can take what resonates and drop what doesn't. So that's the first thing that I want to share with you in this slide, is to take what resonates and drop what does not. Simply, it's simple as that. Like, if something doesn't resonate for you, just drop it. Don't get attached to it. That's my invitation to you. Because attaching to something that doesn't resonate for you, what will that do for your life? Nothing. The only thing I believe contrast is for: negativity, suffering, disagreements, negative energy. And ultimately, negative energy, in my experience, is just a contradiction to the energy that you prefer to embody. That's all it really is. And this is going to be more debatable, but even an experience of trauma, yes, it could have something to do with certain things that have happened to you in the past. But in my experience, eventually, an experience of trauma, negativity, and resistance is when you weren't staying within your lane. You attempted to embody something that was something you weren't ready for. You just weren't ready. And so what that resulted in was an incredibly negative, traumatic experience. And so we're trying to avoid that in this lecture. Although I wouldn't quite use that word, because that can be be confused for people thinking like, oh, like he's running away from his trauma. Look, trauma is always going to exist. But the thing is, what are we going to do with that energy? You know, negative energy is always going to exist. Or a bad way to say it is a perceived negative energy. But again, even as I'm saying this, there might be a lot of, wondering about what it all means. And is he speaking the truth? And how does he have qualifications to talk about this? Not that it really matters, by the way, but I've had thousands of hours of coaching. I also am a qualified human development coach, and I've had probably like, I don't even know, like thousands of hours of meditation at this point, and spiritual inquiry. But look, none of that really matters, because the truth is the truth, and you can access the truth in any moment. Really, ultimately speaking, not saying that these practices don't matter, but ultimately speaking, the truth is the truth. You know what I'm saying? So, why am I sharing all this? Well, take what resonates and just drop what doesn't. Just leave it as simple as that. And if it doesn't resonate for you, then just drop it. Just drop it. Like, there's no point in getting hung up on what doesn't resonate, because here's the thing: is that if you get attached to what doesn't resonate, automatically what will begin to happen is that you'll just get stuck in that frequency, and you're not going to go where you want to go. That is the very nature of getting hung up and attached to a energy that just doesn't resonate for you. It's just you're just gonna get stuck in a reactive pattern that you don't actually prefer to be in. You know what I mean? So that's just what's gonna happen. So ultimately, the point of anything that doesn't resonate for you is there to give you a clear indication of what not to focus on. What not to focus on. Because the patterns of who you used to be, it'll be like very, it's going to have like this sort of strong pull, right? To try to sort of convince you why it's so important to focus in this direction, and it's so serious, right? It's like, no, it's not. So that's ultimately what you can use that kind of trigger, if you want to call it that, for. So with that, let's just get right into the lecture. Now, the first thing that I want to share with you is just a couple ways to work with me as we go into this. Before we go into this, first way is the main way to work with me. That's email coaching. I only have about 5 spots at a time per month, which usually gets filled up pretty quickly. So if you do want to be a part of that, check out the links below, and you can see how to do that, and take a shot to see if there's any spots. The second way is long-term coaching. I don't normally take long-term clients anymore right now, depending on the time when you look at this. It's just not something that really feels aligned to me, but maybe I'll have like 1 or 2. If you want to shoot your shot for that as well, you can do that. Single sessions, they're pretty much always open, but I switch around my schedule with that accordingly on Calendly. And so you can see all the details for that down below. Now, what you're actually going to get from this, is something that I want to be very practical, very, very practical, because if it's not practical, if it's not helping you to be in the most practical and connected state possible, I just don't see a point. I really don't see a point. That's just my goal here, is to make it as practical and as grounded as we can make it, while integrating all the stuff that's interesting to us spiritual folk. But what you're going to get from this is that foundation to move through life feeling grounded, feeling very grounded. Because I don't want to focus on it too much, but the truth of the reality here is that there is chaos in the world. Not everybody is going to be a compatible they're not going to be compatible to your frequency. Not everybody is going to be compatible to your frequency. It's just the truth of the matter here. So what I'm here to provide for you in this lecture is a foundation to stay grounded and connected throughout all these chaotic things in the world. So many chaotic things happening, right? And do you want to get lost in that? Do you want to get lost in the chaos, or do you want to stay grounded in who you really are throughout all this stuff that's happening? Because I'm not saying this to put fear into anybody, but in my experience, unless we manage ourselves in the right way, there's always a chance that we can get lost in all sorts of energy that we just don't really care about. That has nothing to do with who we truly are. You know what I mean? Nothing to do with who we truly are. And that chance always exists. It has to exist. And that's kind of what drives your life purpose, is that possibility of losing your sovereignty and the truth that you create your meaning. Because you can forget that you are the ultimate sovereign being of consciousness. And to hold that light, to hold that space, and to shine a bright example of what other beings, so to speak, can also be, is ultimately your highest purpose in this universe. And so the possibility of forgetting that is always there, right? And that's, in my experience, that's what you're here for. Is to bring all that unconsciousness to consciousness, and not to feel any shame or guilt or negativity or anything like that. Anything like that, So your goal here is to build a powerful resilience. Become unreactive to chaos. Unreactive to chaos. Why get reactive to, all these chaotic things in life? Because one thing that you'll learn from this lecture, if you haven't already figured it out yourself, and I'm just here reflecting to you what you've kind of already seen in your own life, is that, if you start reacting to all the things that you don't prefer, you become a vibrational match to it. Ultimately, you start manifesting all the things you don't want in your life, because there's that reactivity, there's the complaining, there's the anger, there's the resentment, there's the emotional, you're charging emotionally all the things you don't want. And that's a serious challenge that any person can step into. And the way that you overcome that is by building a powerful resilience, a powerful presence. Okay, that's the only way ultimately that you're ever going to move forward in your life, is by deciding to ignore anything that is out of alignment with who you prefer to be. And yes, I said ignore. Okay, and that's so critical. That's so absolutely critical. Ultimately, another thing you're going to get here is discernment as well. Discernment is so critical. See, discernment, what is discernment? Discernment is saying, you know what? I don't trust everybody. Not that I have anything against anybody, not that I think I'm better than anybody, not that I think that I'm better than anybody. I don't think I'm better than anybody, but I don't trust everybody. And if I don't have the capacity to see what is in alignment with who I am and who I want to become, and what is out of alignment with that, I'm just going to be a flying bag in the wind. And so ultimately what I'm providing for you here is how to build an extremely strong discernment and how to build actual trust in your life, actual trust. See, what I believe most people think, and I fell into this trap before, is thinking that I'm building all this trust in my life. But the reality is that, and this is something that I used to do, is I'm just feeding all these programs. Just feeding all these programs, all these unconscious programs. And so you got to realize, like, okay, how do I really know if I'm really actually trusting myself? How do I really know? And so that's what I'm providing for you here, is to build actual trust, real grounded trust that nobody can take away from you. Nobody can take it away from you. Nobody. Nothing can take it. No government, no person, because nothing. Nobody can take it. Like that trust, like you could lose everything. Your business could fall apart. You could lose everything you've ever built in the external world. But this trust is something that you're going to have in you forever, ultimately speaking. It's going to be encoded in your DNA, because you're going to find that true energetic signature that you truly are, that you came here to embody more of. Your true energy signature, your true trust, where you could be lost in the deception of all these different things for who knows how many lifetimes, but eventually, who you really are, you'll come back to that, and you're going to have that within you, right? And every time you stray off your path, that's okay. That will too be unconditionally loved by the universe or God, if you want to call it that, right? But you'll always find your way back, and you'll realize that, okay, I picked up all these things along the way as I explored different realms of who I am, but now it's time for me to decide, who am I? Who am I actually? Who do I want to be? Who am I? Who do I decide to be? Who do I decide to be? And that's something that I'm going to share with you in this lecture as well, to bring back that true connection to who you really are. Because that true connection to who you really are is something that that's what, like, there's nothing, how do I word this? Like money comes and goes. Okay? People come and go. The material realm comes and goes. Manifestations come and go. Right? They come and go. But what's the one thing that doesn't come and go? It's that true trust you have within yourself. And that actually takes a form, believe it or not. It's not just as simple as me saying something like, oh, it's just consciousness and that's it. That's just the end of it. Oh, it's just unconscious, just consciousness. That's the answer. It's not that simple. You know, because consciousness, unconditionally loving consciousness, does actually, in my experience and in my belief, take some kind of form. It takes some kind of form. And when you're building these tangible skills that you decide, this is who I am in your life, and that consciousness takes some form, that's going to be like encoded in your DNA. And you're going to stray off in these directions for many times in your development, in your soul's development. But eventually you're going to bring it all back into who you really are and start to live in energetic harmony with life once again. And once this happens, you remember that, oh yeah, I can truly trust myself again. And that's something that I truly want to provide for you in this lecture, is the remembrance of who you really are and that trust that you have within yourself at all times. And notice how I said remembrance, because it's always there, but we can forget. We forget because we get lost in unconscious programs, or we blame others for the things that are happening in our lives, and we fall into deceptions where we believe that we're living in alignment with the truth, but really we're deceived. We blame, we criticize, we judge, we give away our power. And then the goal is to remember that all of that was an illusion. It was all a deception that was trying to convince you otherwise of the one true fact, which is that you are the one sovereign being in the entire universe. It's you. It's always been you. And it's never not going to be you. It's always been you, and it's always going to be you. And everything that you take from others, you can take back into your own consciousness and own that completely, fully, 100%. Because there's nothing else at some point other than to move forward and to become the person that you truly are meant in a way to be. And ultimately, I don't want to say meant, because that can kind of take away the realization that you have that free will to decide ultimately who you prefer to become moment to moment, and you decide ultimately your life purpose moment to moment. Not that in some way, depending on the way that you want to communicate it, that you can't see that, of course, things are kind of inevitable, right? It's that choiceless choice. It's the choiceless choice of no matter what, ultimately your soul's always going to come back to that one true energy signature. But with that being said, though, you are a consciousness shapeshifter, and that true signature can evolve to different states and to different ways of being. And also, not to mention that time is not linear, so that you can take different forms in each moment and embody different versions of yourself that are all in alignment with each other. You know, it's absolutely amazing. You're not just a human being. You are a consciousness taking different form moment to moment. And it's not that you're going to be fragmented at all, because actually these different parallel versions of you that exist are all aligned with each other. See, if you were trusting yourself moment to moment, but you're fragmenting yourself and you're going out of alignment with your highest self, then you're just following instant gratification. You're taking spiritual concepts and you're using them as an excuse to be lost in a familiar pattern. But the way that you avoid that, and is something that I want to share with you in this lecture, is to notice how all these different versions of you are ultimately all connected with each other. And so what does this bring you to? This brings you to actual trust, where you know 100% for a fact that in this moment right now, I'm being misaligned with who I prefer to be. And you can sense that. And you know how to move forward from that. You trust yourself to say, you know what? I slipped up. Right now, I'm not embodying who I prefer to be. You notice that. You take full responsibility for that. 100% responsibility for that. You stop blaming the world. You're like, oh yeah, I am out of alignment with who I prefer to be right now. Me. Not somebody causing a misalignment. No, I am embodying a frequency that is out of alignment with who I prefer to be, right? And that's that trust in yourself, that discernment to know where to go, who to trust, who not to trust. That's what I want to provide for you here in this lecture. That's what I want to provide for you here in this lecture, because that's ultimately your true power. That's your true power. That's your true power. That's the one thing that the material realm can't take away from you. And if you decide that the material realm can take it away from you, all that's happened is that you've forgotten how to trust yourself. And you've convinced yourself that somebody is to blame. Right? And that's what we're trying to avoid in this lecture. But I don't like to use that word because it can sound like you're running away from something. P.S. We are not. We are clearly, I want to make it very clear as of before I go in and start this lecture, that when I teach you how to focus consciously and deliberately be a creator, what I'm not doing here and what I'm not pointing you to is to run away from any, and I'm saying any, aspect of existence. Everything has a right to exist. And some people might think, well, that's contradicting to everything you've said. No, it's not. It's not contradicting at all. It can only seem that way from the non-discerning eye. But when you learn how to live into true discernment, what you will see is that you can consciously manifest what you want, while at the same time seeing everything that exists and saying, you know what, that exists, but that's not what I want to be. Right? And many people are afraid to own that, including my past self. I used to be afraid to own that. I used to be so afraid to own that. But I'm getting a lot better at navigating these spaces in a much more powerful way. You know what I'm saying? So another thing that I want to share with you as well is that what you're going to get from this is long-term sustainable results, actual growth and change. Because most people, what they do is they think that they're growing, they think that they're changing, they think that they're manifesting their reality, but then at some point, when you're doing it in a misaligned way, in a way that's not in alignment with your spirit, what happens is that if you push through the fear, right? If you push through the fear and you hold on to this reality where you're in resistance, right? You can have that. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's going to fall apart. The question is how long? Right? Because when you do things from the ego and you try to force your way into your manifestations, you can get it. You can get it. There's nothing wrong with that. You can do it. I'm not stopping you because I can't make choices for you, right? I wouldn't encourage it, but, if that's what you want to do, then that's what you want to do. But there's a better way. There's an easier way. There's a way that is actually sustainable. You ever heard progress over perfection? Right? One of the most freeing things that I have ever learned to embody in my life is to simply do without needing to have things be perfect. Can't tell you what is I can't express what's more freeing than that. To do without perfection. And also to do with intention, but we'll save that. So when you start to do without perfection, the need, this need, it has to be perfect, right? And if I want something, I have to push, I need to get it now. Right now. It's like, I'm not saying that you can't manifest what you want now because it all exists. But there's this ego persistence. There's divine persistence. There's a persistence so you can persist in a divine way, in a way that's energetically aligned with your spirit. And there's this ego persistence. Like, I need this right now. No. I need it now. If I don't have it, I'm going to be not fulfilled. Lack. If I don't get this, it's going to be, oh gosh, everything's, so, it's not sustainable, right? And I always say this, but I'm going to say it again. I'll say it again. Even if you get what you want from that space, it is going to fall apart. It has to. How can it not fall apart? Because think about it. How long can you sustain a reality that is grounded in being in resistance? Not too long. How long? For me, I don't even stay in that space. It happens within minutes for me. Minutes. If I notice that I'm creating a self-created resistance, I take responsibility for that and I do what I need to do accordingly. In seconds, minutes. But you know what? What's interesting is that imagine that, and this can happen for various different reasons for a lot of people, and I've been a part of this too, right? Even if you get what you want from that space, how long? 2 days? 1 week? Lifetimes, perhaps? But that's the insanity, right? Is imagine for lifetimes you convince yourself that you want to be in resistance. It's craziness, right? It's absolutely insane. It's insanity. Do you want to be part of insanity? I don't want to be part of insanity. Do you want to keep recreating the same experiences over and over and over, expecting different results? I don't want that. I used to participate in that kind of reality, not anymore. And if I notice that I'm in that again, I do what I have to do accordingly. Anxiety and negativity is your cue to change something about your life. That's what suffering is for. And if you're building a reality that is grounded upon the need to be in suffering and to manipulate others because you don't know how to meet your own needs, is that really sustainable? Let's be honest. Is that sustainable? And if you say yes, how long? How long? Come on, be honest. Be honest. How long is that sustainable? For me, not long at all. Minutes. Minutes. I might convince myself for a few minutes, but I can catch it a lot faster now. But sometimes it can be hours, days, weeks, months, lifetimes. Come on. Be honest. That's not sustainable. That's not sustainable. I'm going to be the one to say it. Many people are afraid to say it. I'm going to be the one to say it. It's not sustainable. Living a reality grounded upon resistance is not sustainable. You know? I'm just going to say it. Who else is going to do it if I'm not going to say it? Somebody has to, so I'll say it. Again. No, I'm just kidding. I won't say it again. So that's what you're going to get. Is you're going to get that foundation that you need to actually create long-term sustainable results. So it's like, let's just say you manifest lots of money. You know, anything you want, right? Whatever amount of money you want, or whatever you want, right? A relationship, whatever it is, you know? Can you hold that frequency? That's the real question. Because you could manifest it, but can you sustain it? I've manifested many things in my past, but then I blew it all up and I couldn't sustain it. What was the point? Well, the only thing that it really taught me was a lesson. It was a lesson. It's a lesson, right? That's how I see it, at least. Anytime I've ever stepped out of, you know, how my too far out of the boundaries of what I truly believed was possible, and then I blew it all up because I couldn't sustain it, right? We've all been there, but now, you know, it's, you know, the key is to see it as lesson and move forward. You know, if you don't do that, what's the alternative? To stay stuck there and blame and judge? Go ahead, do that if you want. I'm not going to participate in that, but because I can't make a choice for you, right? But, you know, it's not fun. It's not fun. And, you know, the best thing you'll get from that is a lesson. What else are you going to get from that? So that's really what I want to provide for you here, is the remembrance that staying in your lane is true growth. Progress over perfection. Such a powerful concept. So powerful. So let's just carry on here. Now, building the foundation for your life is really stepping into your true power, regardless of the circumstances. And you might think that this only has to do with manifestation, but it has not just to do with manifestation. It's about building the entire foundation for your life. I could even argue to say life itself. So I want to start off this slide with a question. And if you haven't noticed, we are officially starting the lecture. We're officially starting. And I want to start off this lecture by asking you a question. And that question is, have you ever wondered why most people get results, but then can't sustain it and lose it? And have you ever wondered why some people seem to just get what they want so easily, and they kind of just always have it. They just kind of always have it. Like, you never really notice that these people complain about anything, and they usually don't really have any kind of like problem. I mean, it's like some people just are just always seemingly abundant. They just seemingly are always abundant. And some people just seemingly, just always complain and have issues. And even if these people that are always complaining, even if they, somehow, get what they want, they just somehow screw it up. Like, you can't, like, I don't want to attack anybody or blame anybody, but it's almost like you just can't trust these people, and, maybe you're even noticing what I'm saying within yourself in some way. And so I don't like to generalize people. So I don't like to say most people and then like generalize most people. And there's a good reason why I don't like to do that. Because the thing is that when I see a person, I never leave them and contain them in a box of who they used to be. Because that person that I see every single time, whether it's in like a coaching session or like in my email coaching or whatever, they are a new person every single time. You know what I mean? So I don't like to say things like most people go 2 steps forward and 2 steps back. But I also, at the same time though, although that is the case, I also believe that there's more conscious people, and there's also people, and you could call it like the, almost like the hive mind of unconsciousness, or, the collective consciousness, or whatever, So I'm talking about, I guess one way to say it is, this was resonating for me right now, is it's almost like there's this unconscious, like subconscious collective mind, right? And if you're controlled by this collective unconscious mind, like if you want to call it that, what happens is that you can never get true progress. Because it's almost like, rather than stepping outside of your programming and the paradigm that you're running under, it's almost like you're trying to progress within like some contained paradigm. And the problem with that is that you can only get so far when you try to push and get results within a specific paradigm. And you can move 2 steps forward within that paradigm, but you may notice that you might fall back into like some older version of yourself, and then you just go 2 steps forward and you go 2 steps back, and it's like you can't really truly change. You can't truly change, because the thing is that you're not thinking outside the paradigm that you're within. And I'm not saying you specifically, but I'm talking about, I guess, again, I don't like to generalize anybody watching or most of society, for reasons that you can probably, I hope you can intuit, right? Because again, I don't want to put any society or person or whatever in a box. You know what I mean? So it's like, I might even kind of be shooting my own self in the foot if I say something like, oh, most of society doesn't have it figured out, because as soon as I do that, think about what I'm speaking into existence. So the way to, in my personal experience, build a proper foundation for your life is to think outside of your current paradigm. And that's why I'm starting off this lecture with, this question. This question, because if you really get it, if you really if this is resonating for you, right, and it's a reflection of perhaps something you're already realizing in your own life, you'll start to be like, yes, what he's saying makes sense. It makes sense, right? And it's absolutely a beautiful thing. So that's what I really wanted to start off with, is just think about that. Think about why. Why is it that some people seemingly have it all figured out and they always get the right thing at the right time and everything's just kind of aligning for them and they never really seem to complain. Nothing really bad happens to them. And they're just, and if you want to even go so far as to say this, I don't want to say anything too outrageous here because, I'm going to get a lot of backlash if I do. And so I'm very conscious of how I say things to make sure that I'm saying things within my own lane, because I don't want to say anything that could be, too outrageous even for me to say. That would be like a crazy reflection for my audience, right? I got to be conscious of how I'm talking to, but it's like, I dare I even say these people don't even get sick as often, Some people just, 10 years, always kind of, they're even like sometimes eating, they don't really seem to have like any particular kind of, if you ask them, hey, what do you do? What's your routine? A lot of these people that you'll notice just have epic results, right? And they're kind of in that flow that I'm talking about. Like, yes, they have like a general kind of like consistency and like some kind of routine, but ultimately, like, you can't ever generalize them. Can't put them into a box. And they're kind of, and usually, it's funny, they're usually doing the things that most people want to do. They're doing the things that most people want to do. Anyways, let's move on here. So when you're living back and forth like this, when you're kind of not in this mentality of progress over perfection, what begins to happen is that you think that you're making changes, but nothing actually changes. Nothing actually changes. You can be pushing through all this resistance, thinking that you're making all this progress in your life. But if you look at the bigger picture, nothing's actually changing. And that's one thing that I always want to teach and invite you to consider in my videos and in these lectures, is that it's always about the bigger picture. It's always about the bigger picture. You want to look at the bigger picture of your life, right? Because you can manifest things in, even a couple months or even a couple years. But how about the entire bigger picture of your life? I've personally made really powerful manifestations in short amounts of time, short amounts of time. But what happened was that I could sense deep in my being, somewhere deep inside me, that it was not sustainable because it was grounded upon a foundation of living in a paradigm where I need to be in resistance to get what I want. And I no longer resonate with that belief system. That's just not part of who I am anymore. It's not part of my belief system to base my paradigm of reality on resistance, because it leaves me in a perpetual loop where I think that I'm changing, but nothing's actually changing. And you can make a lot of money in that space. But the thing is that what happens if you realize that being in that space is not conducive to your highest growth? What's going to happen is that your ego is going to get attached. What if you've been spending 10 years in a reality, in a paradigm of resistance? You've had 10 years invested in that reality. You don't want to let that go. But what if it's out of alignment with the truth of who you are? Then what? What happens then? And so the thing is that also the longer that we stay in these loops, the harder it is to get out. So that's why you want to avoid the problem to begin with. See, wise people, what wise people do is they avoid the problem to begin with. See, if you're stuck in a problem and you think, oh, how do I get out of this problem? How do I solve this problem? Well, how about if you didn't even get that far to begin with? Now, if you stay stuck in a paradigm grounded in resistance and you stay stuck there and you stay there long enough, eventually it becomes harder and harder and harder to get out of that loop because you've convinced yourself that you have to be there. The consciousness has gotten stuck. And if the consciousness gets stuck, what happens is that there's a strong belief and attachment that you don't want to leave that space, but your soul and body is screaming at you to get out of that. The last thing your heart and soul wants is to stay stuck in a paradigm of consciousness and reality that causes your body to attack itself. Right? It's the self attacking the self, believing that it has to. The self attacking the self, believing that it has to, is you could call it a dysfunction. It's a dysfunction. Look, there's no other way to say it. It is a dysfunction. I don't want to talk about this stuff. I don't want to say this stuff a lot. But the thing is that, it's the truth of the matter here. It's, in the ultimate bigger picture, there's no such thing really, and it's going to sound crazy, so bear with me here, as dysfunction. It's just which reality does consciousness want to embody? But the dysfunction is when consciousness believes it has to embody something that it doesn't want to actually embody. Or perhaps it continues to embody something that it has already embodied that it no longer wants to embody anymore. Then the self starts attacking the self. Resistance. That's what creates resistance. All resistance is consciousness embodying something that it has no deepest desire to embody. And then it gets stuck. And I'm not here to share, I'm not a health professional here, but in my experience, that is the ultimate, that's the ultimate reason why the body attacks itself, because consciousness is stuck. So you always want to be thinking about the bigger picture. Are you really growing in your life in the bigger picture? Look at the bigger picture here. There's never been a time where I truly wanted something and I didn't manifest it. Whether it was money, whether it was relationship, whether it was better health, whether it was a mentor, whether it was any kind of friendship, I manifested all of it. And there's been times where I thought that I wanted it and then I didn't really want it anymore and it caused resistance and I held on and it caused lots of suffering because that relationship, it was time for it to end. It was time to move on. It was time to not be attached. It was time to move forward and to be the person that I really wanted to be. And so the key is to understand that there's going to be times where you have certain things, you don't have certain things, but what's the one thing that doesn't change? Your mind, your connection to the bigger picture, and your connection to who you really are, and your understanding that you got to feel safe in your body through all of that. It's about the foundation. It's about the connection to who you really are. It's about being safe in your body. It's about understanding that if you don't have your connection to your soul, what do you really have? You have nothing. You have a void of anxiety and negative emotion that you believe that's what you truly want, yet you're not actually feeling how you truly want in your reality, nor do you actually have what you really want. You just believe that you have what you want, yet you don't actually have what you want. And you might be thinking, Francis, come on. I've heard you say this before. You're saying very similar things in this lecture that you've said in other videos and lectures. Okay, but how are you actually embodying it? That's the question. Maybe I have to say the same thing many, many times so that it finally hits. Because I know for a fact that the same people that feel any resistance to what I'm saying, that's exactly why I'm recording this lecture. Because if there's resistance to what I'm saying, all that's pointing to is that you're not feeling connected to who you really are. Let me give you an example here so I don't make it sound like an attack. One thing that I always tell people is that nobody is ever draining you. You only choose to participate in scenarios that drain you, that make you feel like you're not in your power. And let's say I get a rebuttal like, oh, but Francis, like, what about this and this situation? What about blah, 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 right? And it's like, that's exactly what I'm talking about. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Because think about it. The same people that don't agree with that statement are probably feeling very drained in their life. And I don't want to say that. I hate to say that. You know what I mean? I hate to say things like that. But isn't that the truth? If I make a statement like, hey, if you're feeling drained, it's because you choose to be there. And there's any kind of resistance to that. That in resistance is pointing to the fact that you're drained in your life. That's been my experience. Anytime that I resisted that truth, while resisting that truth, I'm in a state of resistance, not feeling good, and I'm feeling drained. I'm complaining about the truth that choosing to feel drained is a choice while feeling drained and complaining about it. That's what I used to do. I don't do that anymore. I don't participate in it. It's just like it's like it's just the question of like, do you value your state of consciousness? That's the real question here. Many people value different things. You know, I'm not saying to not value money. I'm not saying to not value, you know, the physical realm. I'm saying that different people value different things. And in my personal experience, my number one value is my state of consciousness. Let me tell you why. And I'll move on to the next slide in a second here. Just bear with me. Because I found that when I prioritize things in the external world, I don't actually get what I want. And you might be thinking, like, well, but you can't just be aware and present and manage your consciousness. It's not going to guarantee that you get all the physical things that you want in your life and you're going to be financially abundant. Okay, well, prioritizing the external world doesn't necessarily guarantee that either. Nothing is guaranteed. What do you value? If you value money over your state of consciousness, that doesn't guarantee that you're going to be successful. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to have money. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to have what you want. It doesn't guarantee anything. Nothing is guaranteed, ultimately speaking. There's no guarantees to anything. Everything is a risk. It's a risk to stay stuck in your familiar loops and patterns. It's a risk to get out of that. Both are a risk. But which one is going to have the highest probability chance of you getting closer to what you want? In my experience, valuing your state of consciousness. Valuing who you truly are. Valuing that connection to your source. Right? And so, you know what's funny is that the counterintuitive thing about all of this is that when I value my state of consciousness over these material things, I feel how I want to feel throughout all of the trials and tribulations, and I end up getting exactly what I want anyways. And in fact, not only do I get exactly what I want anyways, it's like, oh, I just got it anyways. I usually have a higher probability chance of getting it. So I'm winning. Look, that's going to sound so egotistical, but it's like I'm winning in all ways. I'm winning in the spiritual realm and I'm winning in the physical realm. You know? Some people try to sacrifice one another. They're so spiritual that it ends up becoming this weird situation where it's like, it's a weird situation. I'll get to the next slide in a second here, by the way. It's a weird situation because if you stay just in the spiritual realm, you get a lot of resistance and you stay stuck in your life. And if you stay stuck just in the physical realm, you get lots of resistance and you're stuck in your life. It's about finding this perfect balance point. I call it the middle point energy. That's that one of my mentors calls it one of my many mentors calls it I have different mentors at different times in my life, but it's this middle point energy where you're perfectly balanced and in harmony, where you realize that like if you're out of balance with either or, your whole life kind of falls apart. Ultimately, the physical and the spiritual are one, and you can't really sacrifice one or the other. You got to find that balance point between both of these things. And when you do that, what will start to happen is that you'll realize that you always have what you need and what you want moment to moment. And you stay resilient through everything in your life. And you're conscious that what I have now is exactly what I want. You know when you hear things like, oh, you're always at the perfect place at the perfect time and there are no coincidences? That stops becoming like some motivational quote that you heard online. It starts becoming your reality. It starts becoming your actual reality where you realize that these things are actually true. It's not just some motivational quote that you read online. Now, what I want to share with you next is that you will never achieve true growth and real results without the spiritual foundation. It's just not going to happen. That's just what I've realized, is that true growth and real actual results comes from being connected to that deeper essence within you. And again, some people think like, oh, is that really true? Is being connected to that deeper essence within you a guarantee that you're going to grow? Not necessarily. It's not guaranteed at all. Nothing is guaranteed, like I said. But in order, in my experience, to truly transform, you have to transcend the programming of who you believe you are. Are you even conscious? That sounds so arrogant, but it's not about better or worse or thinking you're greater than somebody else. It's about seeing, like, when I ask that question, again, kind of like I stated at the beginning of my lecture, this is not about me attacking anybody or making it so that you feel bad about yourself or anything. It's about, when I ask that question, it's like, are you conscious of the fact that you are not your programming, and that you can change your timeline and change your story at any moment? You know, I think that, you know, in the you could call it like in the collective hive mind or the collective consciousness. In the collective consciousness, there's this belief. And again, I don't like to, you know, generalize the collective consciousness, but, you know, I do believe that there is two sides, two polarities to existence. And you can move more towards more life, or you can slowly but surely go towards self-destruction. And in order to not fall into this self-destructive state that I found, it's important to be aware that you are not your programming. Like, you can change your story at any time. You're like you can write your story kind of as you go. You know, you don't have to be limited to some story. And oftentimes we have such little spiritual power. We have given away so much of our power to a program that we have no difference anymore between the essence of who we really are, our creative life force, right? It's really a sexual energy. It's a creative life force. It's the essence. It's the foundation upon all life. If you don't have that connection to that essence, now there's no difference anymore between what you're creating and the essence of where that creation actually comes from. Because life is kind of like a video game, right? You can build up your spiritual power and then manifest, go and then channel that life force energy in the direction of your heart's desire, where you want to go. And if you do it in the right way, you will manifest a reality with other beings, so to speak, even though it is kind of like one consciousness. But that's the game, right? Is that it's almost like consciousness is like, okay, there's this one infinite giant being, but how can I make it so that I can share this love? So then you play the game of having more than one being, more than one person, more than one being in consciousness, two or more beings, right? But if you lose yourself in your manifestation, right, what happens is that you've lost the essence of who, you've lost the individuality. It's almost like if you're just one with everything and you don't know who you are anymore, it's almost like you've become hypnotized by your own creation. And that's nothing, there's nothing wrong with like I make this joke sometimes, and I'm going to make a whole video on this, maybe even in an entire lecture, probably not a whole lecture, but maybe just a video on how to consciously hypnotize yourself. Because you can quote unquote put yourself into a trance, that's fine. But the problem with the word trance is that if you, like, I don't really want to say trance, because the word trance implies that you are no longer conscious of the creation. You're in an unconscious trance. So what we're trying to do here with this lecture and with life, I think this is the point of life in a certain way, is to consciously hypnotize yourself, so to speak, but do not lose yourself in the creation. If you, and I don't know if hypnotize is the right word, because hypnotized ultimately means that you don't know you're being hypnotized anymore. And if you don't know that you're creating what you're creating, what has happened is that you are lost. You're lost in a dream. And there's nothing wrong with that, ultimately speaking. But the problem is that if you're lost in a dream and you don't know that you're writing the script, not only are you in the dream, but you're writing the script. The script can change. Right? I don't think fate is set. Your fate can change at any moment depending on the timeline that you choose to shift into. And I think that's absolutely an amazing thing to become conscious of, because if you become conscious of that, what's happening is that now you're writing your story again. It's almost like a lucid dream. Imagine you're in a lucid dream and you become conscious. What's the first thing you do when you're conscious of when you're conscious that you're in a dream? Automatically, what you do when you become conscious that you're in a dream is you start manipulating the dream. But notice how the word manipulation doesn't mean anything bad. It's just that you're consciously shifting the reality, right? And in a way, like this is going to sound super egotistical, but it's really not. You are God of your own reality. You are the God of your reality. And that's how I wouldn't go. I don't like to say statements like you are God, because like that's just so like that can sound very philosophical and like unpractical. So I'm not going to say that. But what I will say though is that you are God of your reality. And so how does this connect with true growth and results? Well, what could be more practical than consciously directing your consciousness in the direction that you prefer? I used to have a belief like, oh, I'm really bad at visualization. I'm like, affirmations don't work for me. Blah, 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 blah. And think about that. I want you to really think about that for a second. What do you think that did to my consciousness? That was the script that I was writing for myself. And so I tuned into a very dense, kind of physical, dense, nothing wrong with physicality, but there was this connection of the spiritual essence. And it's like this dense, and of course I didn't feel good while I was telling myself that story, because my soul knew that it wasn't who I really wanted to be. When we're telling ourselves a story that doesn't resonate for us, it hurts. It really does hurt. It hurts your heart. It will physically hurt your heart, in my experience. Like, in my experience, when I tell myself a story that is out of alignment with who I want to be, it literally hurts me. It literally hurts my body. My body doesn't feel safe when I tell myself a story that's out of alignment with who I want to be. It literally hurts my heart. It hurts my body. And so I personally do not tolerate and condone being in alignment with a reality that hurts my heart. That's just me. And you would think that that's obviously the path that everybody wants to choose. And of course, I could say that everybody does want to choose that kind of reality. But if you're unconscious that you're the writer of your story and you can change the script at any time, then of course you may feel powerless and you might believe that you have to make the choice, to hurt yourself. Right? That's the story we tell ourselves. Oh, I can't create my reality. I'm bad at visualization. Oh, here's a bad one. I'm so clumsy. Why does this keep happening to me? Blah, 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 blah. Like, think about what that does. What are you telling yourself? Of course. But think about it. Of course. What's going to happen if you tell yourself that is you're going to manifest that. Isn't that so obvious? When you tell yourself a story, you're going to manifest it. If you keep telling yourself, why is this happening to me? This is so clumsy, blah, 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 blah. You're going to keep manifesting that reality. Of course. So in this lecture, as we move forward, I'm going to keep talking about how to build homeostasis and grow sustainably. So really what I'm inviting you to do here is to change your homeostasis. So imagine, let's just say you want to have a relationship, for example. Right? For a lot of people, it's this big deal to have a relationship. And it may feel like a big deal relative to your previous vibration. But let me ask you this. Right now, you're in a reality. You're in some kind of reality. And it just feels totally like there's some things that feel a little bit like, whoa, that's, like for example, let's say you see a person and you believe that this person is like out of your league or something, right? And so most people would say like, oh, this person's out of my league, or you're attracted to somebody that you believe is like out of your league or something along those lines, right? I want you to understand that anything that you're attracted to, you can embody in your own consciousness. You can do that, right? And if something is attracting you and you believe somebody's out of your league, I want you to understand that you can reprogram your consciousness to be at, quote unquote, not there's better or worse, but relative to what you believe to be true, you can get to that person's level also. You can reprogram your consciousness to like also feel in the same league of that person. Let's say you want to manifest $10,000 more money in your bank account per month. That can feel normal to you, but to your current level, it doesn't feel normal to you, right? Expensive is a real word, but understand that expensive with money, for example, is relative to your previous energy. To one person, what is expensive, to another person is not expensive. It's completely relative. Now, I'm not saying that things aren't expensive. I'm just saying that it's relative to your previous energy. So what I'm inviting you to do here, and what I'm going to be teaching in this lecture, is how to create a homeostasis around your desire. And eventually that desire will become boring to you, and you'll need another desire to uplift you and to become even more epic. To become even more epic individual and an even more greater version of who you are. And that's life. That's what life is. It's infinite desire. Every desire that will be met, that wants to be met, will be met in consciousness. But unless you're conscious that what you're doing here is you're changing your definition of normal, you'll never be able to truly manifest. Because you have to change your homeostasis in who you believe you are. You have to change who you are at an identity level. So if you try to push your way through, but you're holding on to the old identity, then the old identity and old paradigm is still going to be controlling you. And that's not going to help you to become who you are. That's going to be holding you back. So as we move forward, I'm going to be discussing more about how to change that homeostasis to the desired program. Right? To the desired program, to who you truly want to be more of, an embodiment more of. And there's no limits here. It's all up to you. Now, the next thing that I want to talk about is, I know that I already talked about the bigger picture in the previous slides, but I do want to allocate an entire slide just for this topic, which is the topic of remembering the bigger picture of your life. See, one thing that I'm always conscious of as I move through my life, in every single action that I take, is what I'm doing in alignment with the bigger picture. The bigger picture, because there's probably many goals that you have in your life. There's probably many things that you want to step into, that you want to create. But what if you could align every single moment of your day where all the actions that you're taking are completely in alignment with that greater picture of your life? So that everything that you're doing is completely connected. It's all connected. So you could be doing many different things, right? And you're not necessarily fragmented, which is what people may confuse, what I'm talking about here with, is the belief that you have to be all over the place. Now I'm talking about like a general consistency to the way that you show up. Yet at the same time though, you're also conscious of the bigger picture, and you're just like, you're in flow. You know, one thing that one of my mentors taught me that's very powerful is to get into flow and then stay in flow. Now, if you can learn to stay in flow, and it's not that you're not going to be out of alignment sometimes. Like, of course, you're going to fall out of alignment sometimes. But it's about seeing the bigger picture, staying in alignment. And if you fall out of alignment, don't fret over it. Don't get hung up over it, but just get back into alignment. Just get back into alignment, because there's going to be times where you fall out of alignment, and that's totally normal. It's so normal. You know, it's something that we need to remember sometimes, is that it's completely normal to fall out of alignment. But the thing that I want to share with you is not to get stuck there, not to get stuck, you know. And the more that you get out of alignment, once again, like I shared before, the more that you convince yourself that you have to stay out of alignment. So it's like getting out of alignment once, no big deal. It's all good. But then the problem that this is what the ego does, is it judges itself. And ultimately speaking, judging yourself is okay. But then what happens is, like, the ego starts to judge itself for judging itself. And then judging itself for judging itself. And then judging itself for judging itself. And then before you know it, you've completely lost touch with your highest vision, with your intention, who you want to be. And then you're just kind of on this, you're just kind of on this goose chase of staying stuck in the past, old reality. You know what I mean? And it's not a fun place to be. It's not a fun place to be at all, because what happens is that it's like you just keep hurting yourself and judging yourself and judging yourself and judging yourself and judging yourself, and then it's like, and then it hurts, and it's completely insane. It makes no sense, because you're judging yourself for just something that you want to do. You know, you could just, for example, you might just want to like sit down and just like watch some YouTube videos. Is there anything wrong with that? Not really, but if you judge yourself for wanting that, you could be sitting there in intense suffering and misery. And the truth of the matter is, you could just be watching YouTube videos in total peace. And then when you're done with that, you just go do something else, also in peace. You know what I'm saying? And that could be your life, is just do everything that you want to do moment to moment in complete peace. And when you're done with that, just move on to something else. Just move on to something else. But it's like we get stuck in these loops where we believe we have to keep getting stuck. So I just want you to remember the bigger picture of your life. As you're taking your actions throughout your day, I want you to ask yourself, am I in alignment with the bigger picture? Okay, and also moment to moment, am I in alignment with my intention? With my intention. You can ask yourself that question. Because when you're in alignment with your intention, you are a powerful spirit. And the key is, you know, you don't even necessarily have to ask yourself. You can just kind of sense in what you call the emotional guidance system if you're in alignment. That's a powerful, powerful skill to develop. I've been honored to learn about this in my life, to understand that I can trust my emotional guidance system. Think about it. How powerful is it to know in each moment if you're in alignment with your intention? You just know. You know who to trust. You know who not to trust. And so one thing you can do as well is just think about the bigger picture, because there's probably many goals that you have in your life. Maybe write them all down if you want. What are some big goals that you have for the greater vision of your life? Big goals. And then what you can do is you can also have like mini intentions, moment to moment, and you can kind of gauge within your emotional guidance system, is the way that you're being and are the actions that you're taking in alignment with those smaller intentions, and also are you in alignment with those greater intentions as well. That's something very, very powerful that you can do, because when you learn to do this, what starts to happen is that you're unstoppable. Not in the ego sense where like, oh, I'm unstoppable and I can, win at everybody and win at everything and blah, blah, blah. It's not that kind of energy. It's like, it's an unstoppable energy of intense, not even intense. That's not the right word. It's just a deep sense of peace. A deep sense of peace where you're unstoppable in the sense that nothing can touch your energy, your energetic state of being. And of course, you're still going to be in a way affected by people's energy. But what's going to happen is that when you notice that your energy and power is getting low, you're going to say, you know what? I'm letting myself go right now in the negative sense. Not let go in the sense that you're trusting yourself, but letting yourself go like in a negative sense where you are allowing your emotional energy system to be drained and not being in alignment with your highest vision. And I mean, again, people might think, well, what's your highest vision? What does that even mean, Francis? Well, that's what you can, ask yourself, not to get too hung up on, in my personal opinion and experience, asking these questions, because what's funny is that I've noticed personally that asking questions to myself implies that I'm not already having what I want. It's like, oh, how do I accomplish this goal? Let me ask my higher self. That kind of implies that I'm not aligned with who I want to be. That's just me personally. But you can ask yourself that question if it resonates for you. But, don't get, in my personal opinion and experience, it's powerful to not get hung up on that and just decide what you want to be and be it. Just be it. Just take a risk. Maybe it's not the right thing. Maybe it's not who you want to be. Just be it. Just see what happens. Because so much can move forward in your life when you just make a choice on this is who I want to be. I don't know if it's the right intention. And then you gain momentum. And before you know it, now you're in flow. And when you're in flow, all these questions kind of fade away out of your consciousness. Because you're just embodying who you want to be. There's no more confusion. I'm personally not really confused in my life anymore. I don't ever experience confusion or anxiety or fear or negativity. And the thing is that if I do, I know how to handle that now. I don't really experience much fear and anxiety, because if I experience fear and anxiety, if it ever comes up, that's simply my emotional guidance system telling me to take action. One of my mentors taught me this too. Very powerful. Anxiety and fear and worry is actually pointing you to take it's all anxiety and fear and worry is telling you is that you need to be taking action in some area of your life. That's all it is. You need to step up. You got to step up, you got to move forward, and you got to live it up. You got to say, you know what? This challenge, I'm not going to allow this to define who I am. And you simply make a choice to move forward from it, and that's it. You don't get hung up on the negativity. You don't get hung up on the challenges. You don't get hung up on all these things that you believe are holding you back. You just go be who you want to be. You know what I mean? And then when you do this, what happens is that nothing can touch you. And again, if it touches you, you're not, like, think about it. I'm never confused, but if I am confused, I'm not confused about the fact that I'm confused. Does that make sense? I'm able to zoom out of the confusion and see okay, yeah, I'm confused right now, but I'm not confused about that. I know how to, I don't always necessarily know the exact path to overcome that, but I have I trust my emotions to be okay, I need to focus on something else in order to get myself out of this. What is that going to look like moment to moment? I can't tell you. I don't know really, because it's different. Not that I don't want to tell you. It's just that every single moment calls for a different action. Every single moment calls for a different action. And if you can learn to master this, what will happen is that you're never going to be confused about the fact that you're confused. And this is what it means to be connected with that bigger picture of your life. To allow your own higher self to guide you. You are your higher self. And to see that your emotions are a very powerful guidance system. Your emotional body is a very powerful guidance system. It's very powerful. It's much more powerful than I think we give credit for in society, in the collective consciousness. And all the collective consciousnesses, by the way, is a whole sub-reality that you've subscribed to as a result of being out of alignment with your intention. And then you fall into a reactive loop and pattern, and you create an entire reality around being out of alignment with your intention. That's it. That's all the collective consciousness is. It's many human beings that have come together that are all subscribing to a belief system grounded upon an initial reactivity that they all had in a similar sense. You know what I mean? So it's hard to give an example, but like I'm sure you can intuit maybe some past versions of yourself where you've done this. And so the key is to realize that you don't have to subscribe to that. Once you realize it, if you notice your energy field getting a little bit denser, and like you're wearing too many clothes in a hot summer's day, you say, you know what? I'm not going to go down this road again. I've already been there. I've already seen this. I already know how to overcome this. I already know what it's like to go down this road. Maybe you don't know how to overcome it actually, but what you'll know is that you don't want to go down that road again. And so it's time for you to step up. It's time for you to step up and be a greater version of you. That's the truth. That's the truth. Look, no matter what's happening in your life, you always got to move forward. That's what I believe. It doesn't matter how many challenges you have. If you're still alive, you've got to move forward. And that goes for any human being on the planet. You've got to move forward. You've got to. Because the moment you give up is the moment that you're slowly going towards, in my opinion, your grave. Slowly towards your death. I believe that going towards your death is completely a choice. I know that's outrageous to say. I know that's completely outrageous. That's my belief system. I believe if I let myself go and I move closer towards the grave, that's completely my choice. That's my belief system. I believe that if I'm still here, I always have a choice to move forward and to become more of who I truly prefer to be. That's what I believe. I believe that it's our destiny to continue moving forward no matter what. To allow God's will to flow through you. And to become a more crystal clear channel of the divine, more and more and more. More pure, more crystal clear, more connected to who you are, more and more and more. It never ends. And you might think that's egotistical, but I don't believe it is. I think the most egotistical thing to do is to give up and stay stuck in a dense reality that's out of alignment with your highest self. That's ego. Ego is giving up on life. Ego is letting your ego take control of you. That's ego. Ego is pretending that you're not a conscious being that is manifesting its reality epically, and to decide to live into some sub-reality that's out of alignment with your intention, where you're living in this collective reality where you believe that you don't choose your belief systems and that you're not a creator of your own universe. That's ego. That's ego, in my opinion. What's not ego is deciding who you want to be and fully owning that 100%. That's not ego. That's your higher self flowing through you. Resisting your desires is ego. Resisting who you truly want to be, that's ego. Calling something bad, existentially speaking, that's your ego. Judging yourself for wanting something and to create a self-generated resistance in your life that's completely unnecessary and can be totally avoided. I don't even want to say like, oh, you can fix that. I can say, you know what I can say? Not only can you fix it, not only can you reverse all this negative energy and fear that and I'm talking to anybody here. Not only can any single person, I believe, no matter whether, if you're alive, if you're conscious, if you're still listening to this, if you're still alive, if you're receiving this message, not only can you reverse any negative energy, any fear-based timeline that you've created in your life. You know what I can say? I can say you could have even avoided it to begin with. You didn't even have to create it. And the thing is, when you hear that, what begins to happen is that there's this need to judge ourselves. But only judging yourself will only send you further down a timeline of fear. The key is to stop judging yourself, accept the situation, and then move forward. Move forward. Continue on with your life. That's not ego. That's your higher self. I think the highest choice, the most spiritually and conscious aligned choice we can make is to step into an energy of non-resistance and to move on with our freaking lives. Come on. How is that ego? How is that ego? Tell me how that's ego. I don't think that's ego. If that's ego, then hell, let it be ego. Because I don't tolerate a reality of suffering and misery and fear. And I'm not going to live in a co-creative reality with other people that also have convinced themselves that they have to be in a fear-based timeline. That's not part of my belief system. It's just not part of my belief system. It's not who I am. I am in control of my space and my energy and the frequencies and the energies that I embody in my life. I'm completely in control. And I think that's the least egotistical thing that any person can do in their life. That's my belief system, personally for me. You make your choices, that's totally up to you, but that's my belief system. And I highly encourage and invite every single person to do that, not because they heard me say it, not because they're blindly trusting in me, but because perhaps whoever is listening to this, or any person, this might not apply to you, but this might in this moment, because you might be just kind of resonating with this energy, and maybe this is not applying to you in your life, but you're resonating with this, and you're sensing that maybe in your past self you've stepped into these timelines. But if you ever step into this kind of timeline in the future, so to speak, which is a different moment in this moment now, remember that you don't have to subscribe to that. You don't have to subscribe to that. Not at all. Not unless you choose to believe that you have to. And that in and of itself is completely a choice as well. Now, the second thing that I want to share with you in this lecture is an interesting concept that is very interesting because the thing is that I always talk about this, and I want to go a little bit deeper into this, which is the concept that a lot of people are very fragmented, which means that they're split off in many different directions in their life. And there's no priority to what they want to create in this moment. There's no okay, you know what? This is my priority. This is who I want to be now. So these other things in my life are temporarily gonna be on hold. And it doesn't feel like a sacrifice because usually these things that you're going to be putting on hold, you realize that in the moment you don't actually want that. But let me just explain a little bit deeper. So the thing is that because everything is energy. Everything is energy. And when you subscribe to one frequency, one way of being, automatically what that implies is that you are not subscribing to some other frequency. So the reason that I'm sharing this is because I want to share this concept that if you allocate resources and consciousness towards one thing in your life, one intention, and you hyper optimize that intention in your life, what will happen is that you're going to be unstoppable in the sense that there's going to be so much bandwidth. There's going to be so much. You're going to have such a powerful manifestation coming in your life in such a powerful way because all that consciousness is dedicated in this in the specific direction that you want in your life. And I don't necessarily mean you have to, like, I personally, and this might sound like a contradiction, but trust me, it is not. I personally like to shapeshift my consciousness moment to moment. So I like to do a lot of things in my life. There's many different things, and I will allocate my attention to exactly what I'm doing in that moment. But again, if I'm going to be doing multiple different things in my life, I got to make sure that all these things are holistically working together. So everything that I do is connected with every other thing. And although to the outside world, it may seem like, oh my gosh, like he's doing so many different things. How is he doing that? Oh my God. Really, I'm just doing one thing at a time and I'm giving it my full attention. And it happens very easily. It's not hard for me to get a lot done. It's not hard at all. In fact, this might blow some people's minds. And I know that sounds extremely arrogant, but I'm just going to say it anyways. And the reason I'm just going to say it anyways, because the thing is that the most important thing that I found is that when I'm giving my full attention to everything that I'm, like each thing that I'm doing, I gave it my full attention. It somehow becomes even easier. It becomes even easier than not doing that, if that makes sense. So it's like you would think that like allocating your resources and taking actions and being like super focused, being extremely focused and taking only the actions in a calculated way that feels aligned with your energy and all these things. And so you think like, oh my gosh, it takes a lot of work. It's going to take so much consciousness. It's going to be so hard. It's going to be so difficult. Like that's what it sounds like when you're stuck in a rut. That's what it sounds like when you're stuck out of alignment with who you are. When you hear somebody talking like this, it can either uplift you and motivate you, or it can do the complete opposite and be like, God, that sounds horrible. It's going to be so hard. It's going to bring up anxiety. But it's the opposite. 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 Getting a lot done is easier in my life than not getting a lot done. Delivering powerful value to the world is easier. Let me give you an example. This 2-hour lecture, being in alignment with what I want to create, is much, much easier than when I used to have many, for example, health challenges in my life. And when I was kind of letting myself go, and when I was, letting myself be bored. Like when I was like bored and like waiting for something to happen, right? Like in the lack frequency, like, why is this happening to me? That was a lot harder than actually being an epic creator and recording 2-hour lectures. You would think that recording 2-hour lectures, oh man, that's going to take a lot of work, right? Being stuck, you think like, oh, not doing anything, that's the easy path, right? No, it's not. In my experience, it's not. The hard path is to not do anything with your life and to let yourself be bored and to not have a vision. I swear, it's very backwards to how we've been conditioned. It's very backwards to how I've been conditioned. For me personally, the more that I step into in my life, and I say, you know what, I'm going to step into a more powerful version of who I am. I'm going to deliver more value to the world. I'm going to start manifesting more of what my heart really actually wants. I'll tell you what, it's easier than not doing it. And it's so weird. I don't know why it is. I know exactly why, but it doesn't make sense to the ego, but it makes sense once you're in flow in it. Rather than seeking for the answer, you just figure it out kind of just by being who you want to be. Because trying to figure it out implies that you're not being who you want to be. When I stopped trying to figure it out and I started just being who I wanted to be, my life just became so much easier. And so how is this connected with allocating resources and consciousness towards one thing? Well, in the bigger picture, you can have many different goals, but if you start giving each moment your 100% full attention to everything you're doing, you'll just kind of get a sense for what is not helping you and what is helping you to become who you want to be. You just start to get a sense for it. You just start to get a sense for it. And so over time, what will happen is that you will have less space for certain things automatically, and it won't feel like a sacrifice. When I say this, it might sound like, oh man, it's going to feel like I'm lacking something. No, lack doesn't exist, because all that's happening is that you already experienced that thing that you're declining now. You've already experienced it. So remember that when I'm saying this, if any lack comes up, remember that lack is the ultimate illusion. I'm not asking you to even attempt to consciously try to not have something in your space. I'm saying to just focus so much on what you want and to be so conscious to that process that what you don't want will just fall away very, very naturally. Very naturally. Can't tell you how many times that I thought it was going to be this big, big deal to like let go of this old thing in my life, and I have to make a big jump now, and it needs to be this big deal, and wow, it's so serious. Oh my gosh, it's so serious. Ego makes everything serious, right? It's so serious. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to. And then it's like, no, actually, you know what happened? It naturally fell away. Naturally. And that's what I believe is the natural flow of consciousness. I tell you, it happened to me again and again and again and again. I thought there was going to be this big deal to like let go, like to talk to this person and like have this phone call and like tell them this. And it's like, let's just say, you know, you don't want to work with somebody anymore and you decide to tell them, hey, I just want to move on to something else. I've had a phone call like that before, and you know what happened? The person was like, hey, no worries. And they didn't, and it was not a big deal at all. And so when you start to focus all your attention on what you want, what you do not want, you'll have less space for it. So let's say you're starting up a business, for example, and the reason I'm hesitating is because, you know, it's hard to give examples with these lectures, and I try to give analogies and examples as much as possible, but it's so individual for each person that sometimes it's very difficult to do that. So, you know, I mean, the key is just to like, okay, I'll just give an example. Let's say you're starting a business, and you don't want to be like you can't respond to every single person that messages you. You just can't. Even if you wanted to, you just couldn't. You just can't, because you're going to be so focused on other things. And you're not going to have to like try to create a boundary. I'm not saying to like create a boundary and like I need to create a boundary with these people in my life because they're not in alignment with my vision. It's not like that. It's like you'll just naturally just respond less to certain things because you're so focused on what you want. You know what I mean? When people like try to create a boundary and try to block people, blah, 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 so serious, blah, blah, all that's pointing to is that they're just focusing on what they don't want. And there's resistance, and they're creating more of what they don't want. It's not the serious thing where you need to create a boundary. It's just that and that's the thing, people try to do this with like relationships and stuff too. It's like, oh, I need to create a boundary with this person and not respond to them so they'll respond to me back more. Blah, blah, blah. No, it's not like that. You got to be naturally so connected with your highest vision that you're just so focused on that all the things that are out of alignment with that, you just won't be focused on it. That's it. Very, very natural. Now, I want to share with you a very interesting concept to conclude this slide and also this half of the lecture, which is that consciousness kind of works like resources on your computer. That's kind of how it works. It's almost like you only have a certain level of bandwidth in your computer. So if you, for example, when I'm editing a video on my computer and I'm rendering the video, all the other programs in the computer don't work as fast, so I can't use things. And of course, if you have like a really, really powerful computer, it doesn't even matter in that case, because even if all that memory, if all that capacity is still being used on one really, really like intense video or program or something, automatically there's less resources for all these other things. And I personally found in my life that when I have lots of focus on all these things that I don't really want to have in my life, I automatically have less resources for the things that I do want. And it's very interesting because oftentimes we're giving up all our bandwidth to these things that we don't even care about. We're giving away all our consciousness and our power and our attention to these things that we don't even want to have and experience in our life. And so what I found to be very useful is to start to free up that bandwidth by focusing more on the things that I want, and to be the person that I truly want to be, until all these things that I don't really care about just kind of fall away. Because you don't want to be wasting all of your bandwidth on anything that you don't actually care about. And so you'll find that, very interestingly enough, the more that you focus on what you actually care about, all the things that you don't even care about just kind of fall away, because you free up also all this memory, all this capacity, all this consciousness to be focused in the direction that you want. So think about it kind of like a computer, right? You got to turn off all these extra programs and tabs and delete all these bookmarks and all these things that you don't care about, because it's like you don't even care. It's really interesting. When I set an intention to go in a new direction in my life, I start noticing like all these things in my consciousness and in my field, like, oh, that doesn't resonate. It's like, God, that was in my field the whole time. I didn't even realize that. You know what I mean? And so you'll start noticing these things in your consciousness as you start to focus more on what you prefer. You'll start noticing like, oh yeah, this was in my field of consciousness. God, that was there for 15 years. I didn't even realize that, right? Because like these subconscious programs are controlling our life that we're not even conscious of most of the times. We're not even conscious of these programs, and these programs are running our life, whether we're conscious of it or unconscious of it. So the key is to start to become conscious of more of what you want. That's personally how I would word it, because I personally don't really resonate with like, let go of all these things, with all these things you don't really care about, or remove this is because like oftentimes I think that mentality just starts to put more attention on what you don't want, right? Because the thing is that I found very useful to be in my life is that when I'm very clear on who I prefer to be, anything that's out of alignment with that becomes very abundantly clear. Let's be honest here. If you want to be a certain person, you know exactly what you have to do, and you know exactly who you have to be, and you know exactly what you're going to have to say no to. But oftentimes, we're just not ready. We're not ready. We want to put all the blame on the external world, and this is why I can't have what I want. But yet we're still participating in all these things that we very, very well know deep inside our hearts. Deep, not even in our hearts, in our logical mind, are out of alignment with what we care about. You can be rational too. You can be logical too with manifestation. Using your skill sets and using your logic and all the things you've learned along your journey is completely preferred. I think it's something you've got to use for your manifestations, but you want to be using it in an aligned way that actually feels right to you, and that actually feels like it's connected to your manifestation. So I think this is why it's one of the most important things you can do is get very clear on what you want. And you've heard that before, like, oh yeah, I got clear on what I want. I've heard that before, Francis. That's so obvious. But it's okay, you've heard that before, but are you living in alignment with that? That's the real question. It's one thing to hear about it and to mentally masturbate on these concepts of manifestation and have what you want and go towards what you want. It's another thing to completely align your thoughts and your feelings and your actions towards what your heart actually wants. It's a whole nother ball game. And most people are, I'll be very honest with you. I believe that we really know what we need to do and who we need to be to get what we want, but we just pretend like we don't know so that we can give ourselves an excuse to let our subconscious programs run us. Self-sabotage is a choice, and it doesn't seem like a choice when the pull of the old programming is very, very strong. Depending on how much the subconscious programming has been controlling your life and how strong that pull is. So the more that the subconscious programs are controlling your life and you're unconscious of that process, the more it's going to feel like it's not a choice. And it's like, oh, it's not a choice, Francis. How can you just say it's a choice? Here are the reasons why it's not a choice. This. What about these people and these situations and this, right? What about this example? And these examples, are they helping you to get towards your goal? That's the question. Is it helping you to get? If it's not, then I don't want to hear about it. And I know how that sounds. It's like I know how that sounds, but it's like it's the truth. It's the truth, right? And you don't want to talk about it either. Trust me, you don't want to. It's not you talking. It's the program. The program is trying to tell you why you got to keep talking about all these things that are completely out of alignment with who you want to be. And so I found that when I get very clear on who I want to be, I start to control my mind. I start to control my thoughts. I start to think who I would be, think as if the person that I would be if I already had what I want. What begins to happen is that my emotional guidance system gets very, very clear, and I start noticing the past frequencies that I was embodying. I start noticing the past more. And that was a previous present that I was embodying, right? I start noticing all these things that I was embodying. And so when you start to become honest with yourself about what is truly resonating for you and what is truly self-sabotaging you, then you stop giving it attention. That's when you can start to make bold moves like blocking a person. Not because you're trying to make this weird, you know how people try to block people or not respond to their SP or whatever or whatever it is so that they can come back. No, you don't want to be doing it. You want to be so focused on your goal. You want to be so focused on being the person that you want to be. You simply do not have space for other things. Just like the video on the computer. When my computer is fully editing a video, I go on my computer here. There's this thing called you can go on Task Manager if you have Windows computer. I go on Task Manager, and sometimes what I do is I set the resources of the memory of my computer all towards the video. Right? And the video usually renders a lot faster when I do that. Right? And while that's happening, I'm usually not even on the computer by that point. I'm usually doing something else, right? So all that energy in that reality is just totally in the video, right? Totally in the video. Now, if I need to be focused on other things, that's fine. I will actually do that. I will actually set less memory on the video so that I can put my attention towards other things. But that video will render slower. That's the only cost of that. Does that make sense? So the video will render slower. So if you have this intention that you want to create, but then you're still participating in all these things that you know is out of alignment with that, that's fine. You're probably still going to get to the intention. You're probably still going to get to manifestation no matter what. It's all fine. But the thing is, you're going to get there a lot slower. It's going to happen in a much slower way. It's not going to happen as fast. It's not going to happen as aligned, and it's going to feel more dense and slow, and you're going to feel resistance along the process because your guidance system is telling you that, okay, this thing you want, you're still going to get it, but you're split off in too many directions right now. And so you have less space in your consciousness, just like the memory in the computer, for other programs, for other things. So this bandwidth and attention and capacity that you have is something you want to be conscious of. Like, for example, if somebody messages me and I don't feel balanced in my body. Maybe I worked a lot that day or whatever. Not that I feel like work is hard or anything, because I love what I do, and I make sure that I have the capacity to record these lectures and to do what I do in a way that feels kind of aligned to me, where it doesn't feel like I'm resisting. Everything that I do, I try to do it so that I feel as little resistance as possible. If I'm resistant, that personally for me, the way I'm programmed is that's my cue to rejuvenate myself and rejuvenate my spirit and my body and my physical body too. Right? It's all connected. Thoughts, feelings, and actions. I make sure that I'm taken care of before I give anything to the world. That's just how I personally operate. Now, if all your attention is split off in these directions that are out of alignment with your desire, all that's happening is that you're not really serious about what you want to create. That's the truth of the matter here, is that you're not really serious. You say you're really serious, you say you want to do this, but really what's happening is that you're not. And that's okay. I'm not blaming you or judging you, but the thing is that you're just not serious. Not that life has to be serious, it is a cosmic joke, and we're here to just manifest a reality and have fun. Okay, but it's like at some point though, it's like, okay, like, do you want what you want? And are you willing to be the person that you need to be to get it? Right? And you might think like, oh, that's so egotistical. It's not egotistical. Again, what's egotistical is being in a perpetual loop that is out of alignment with your desire, in my personal opinion. I really believe that the most non-egotistical thing we can do, and I already said this, but I'm going to say it again, is to align your thoughts and your feelings and your actions, to completely take control of your space 100%. Completely. 100% take control. People talk about, like, I'm going to make a whole video on this. People talk about, like, oh, how do you surrender to God? Or how to surrender to the universe, surrender to God. You want to know how I surrendered to God and to the universe? By taking complete control of my thoughts and my feelings and my actions, and to be completely aligned with who I prefer to be. Then I'm actually surrendered to God, in my experience. When I'm not taking control of my thoughts, I'm not taking control of my actions, when I'm not taking control of my energy and my vibration and my frequencies in my space, I'm not surrendered to God. I'm being controlled by a program that I don't even want to be controlled by. How is that surrender to God? To surrender to the will of God means to take complete control of your space. Because think about it, when you take complete control of your space, God is now flowing through you in a very powerful way. You are a crystal clear channel for the divine. Because who is the one controlling that? I don't want to get too much into non-duality here because I want to keep it practical, but if you believe you're not the controller of your reality, effectively what has happened is that your ego has taken control of you because you believe that you are separate from your desire. You believe that you are separate from God. You believe that you are separate from consciousness itself, effectively making you a puppet of a program that you don't even want to participate in. Effectively leaving very little bandwidth to be focused in the direction that you want to be. For example, if you want to start a business, but you're staying stuck in a 9-to-5 job, you have less bandwidth to work on your business. When I was dropping out of school, I think it's been like 4 to 5 years ago at this point, I knew for a fact that staying in college, I used to be a software developer, and it just didn't resonate for me. I'm really good with technology. I'm really good with editing videos and being on the computer and doing things, but only in a way that's aligned with my business and my YouTube channel and recording these lectures and teaching and doing these types of things. But just being a programmer, working for a company, not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's just, for me personally, it wasn't on. And I knew 100% for a fact, that if I was serious about becoming an entrepreneur and stepping into the role that I wanted to be in the world, I knew for a fact that I had to drop out of college. I just knew 100% for a fact. I just knew. I knew that I had to drop out. And so that's exactly what I did. And guess what happened? When I walked in, there was like at my college, there's like this place you walk to. There's this place you walk to. It's like the student desk or whatever. I don't remember what it's called. It's like student services or something. I walk over and there's these papers you got to sign to drop out of college. There's these papers you got to sign, right? And so I walked over to the lady and I took the papers. And I remember like signing the papers. And I'll tell you what, it's going to sound very cliche, but I'm just going to tell the story anyways. When I signed those papers, I immediately felt a huge relief, a huge weight that was just released out of my physical body. It's almost like I was holding the energy of that college in my body. You see what I'm saying? And if my intentions were aligned with being a software developer, there would be nothing wrong with holding that type of energy in my body, with embodying that type of frequency. But because I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur, which I wasn't yet at the time, and so I just felt a huge relief. A huge relief. The moment that I signed those papers, I felt one of the biggest reliefs that I've ever felt in my life. I just felt so free because like I knew that I let go of this energy that was out of alignment with who I wanted to be. I just knew for a fact that I took the step towards my desire. I took that step. And when you take that step towards your desire, for me, it didn't feel like I was letting go of college and there was like a lack behind it and oh my gosh, I'm letting go of something and this is so sad. Like, it didn't really feel like that. It didn't feel like I guess there's like a natural like grief to let go of something, but my consciousness isn't really programmed in that way. I don't really see lack. All I see is I'm taking another step towards my desire. That's all I saw in that moment. I saw, you know what? I'm sending these papers. I didn't feel any fear, any lack, any resistance. I felt free. Because think about it. Any like all I perceived in that moment was gratitude for the direction that I'm headed in. And I felt peace and joy and connectedness to who I really am. That's all I saw. I saw more peace and joy and gratitude, and I really felt like I was moving towards who I wanted to be even more. And so all this bandwidth, all this memory, just like on a computer when you have like the memory and the RAM, if you know what RAM is, but let's just say bandwidth to make it more too easy if you don't know how computers work and stuff. I had more space. I literally had more space. It's like, oh yeah, I know. I was able to notice automatically. You know what happened also? Not only did I feel less resistance, I automatically started to notice more of all the things that were in alignment with who I wanted to be. Whereas before, I couldn't even see it in my field. I couldn't even see the opportunities and the abundance and the wealth because I was wearing like blinders that was associated with the college that I was at. I was wearing blinders. I had goggles on that was associated with that college that was blocking me from seeing the opportunities that were in alignment with me becoming an entrepreneur and starting my YouTube channel and being the person that I wanted to be. But the moment that I let that go, I freed everything up for me. And this happens to me time and time and time again. The more that I become clear on who I want to be, I notice all the things that are out of alignment. I take the necessary action and I remove these things that are out of alignment. Then I immediately feel more free. And then I have more space and more consciousness to see the things that are in alignment. And it's a never-ending journey of moving more towards what I really want. And so it's absolutely an amazing journey because you know what's funny is that one thing that I'm noticing that I just want to share before we get closer to the end of this lecture is that I'm seeing that lack, like I'm seeing, like as I develop more into more of who I prefer to be, I'm seeing that lack is just not a real thing because you can embody every single frequency fully, and then when you're ready to let that frequency go, you can move on to the next one. Right? And you can do that. So when I was at the college, I learned a lot of powerful things from that college, but eventually it stopped resonating. It stopped really being aligned with who I wanted to be. So what I did was I just let it go. And again, I didn't feel any lack. I felt free and I felt gratitude and I felt abundance. Whereas it can be very easy to when you lose something in your life, you might perceive it as I'm losing something, but remember that you're moving towards more of something else always. Energy never gets created or destroyed ultimately. You're just transferring to another state. That's all that's happening. You just keep moving towards a different state, more of what you really want. That's it. So lack doesn't have to exist. You know what's funny? Think about it. If I really, really wanted, I could just go back to college. If I really wanted. So it's not like it doesn't exist. It exists. I just don't want it right now. And I probably never will in this life because I don't think college is for me. It's not aligned with who I want to be. But if I really wanted to and it was aligned for whatever reason, I could go back. I just don't want to. So it's like, fear is ultimately just not even, you don't need to be fearful of anything. Just focus on what you want. What you don't want will fall away. And it's as simple as that. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. It really doesn't. It really, really doesn't. It really doesn't have to. It's so simple. It's so simple. It's so freaking simple that we want to create all these problems. No, there doesn't have to be as many problems as we believe there has to be. Just focus on what you want, set the intention, take the aligned action, and trust yourself along the way. What you don't want will fall away naturally. You will be channeling through your being all the necessary words and thoughts and feelings and whatever to move towards your goal. And what's not aligned, that will just fall away, and it will feel pretty effortless. And if it doesn't feel effortless, all that's telling you is that you're not aligned with the intention. It's so simple. I'm telling you, literally, it's so simple. The keys to the freaking universe are so simple that it's shocking to me how we can convince ourselves that it's not, and how these subconscious programs can take a hold of our life, almost like we're being possessed by a program. But I don't see life in that way anymore of, oh, I'm being possessed. You know why? Because I don't see anything as I'm being possessed. I see things as I am choosing to participate in a frequency that is out of alignment with my desire. I don't get drained by people. I allow myself to feel drained by participating in things that don't resonate for me, and I learn from those mistakes. I learn. I see it as a lesson. I don't see anything. And if I do ever feel drained, you know how I see that? I view that as, oh, I just learned a lesson. Move on. That's it. That's it. I don't get hung up on it. I don't get attached to it. I don't complain about it. I don't tell anybody about it. I'm not going to call up my friend and tell them how it was, oh my gosh, this happened to me and I got drained. This person's such a... No, I don't do any of that. What a waste of time. What a waste of my capacity. If I'm going to be sitting here complaining about how I learned all these lessons and all this happened, that's capacity that I'm focusing on things that are even more out of alignment. And think about it, while I'm telling people how drained I was, I'm feeling drained in that moment. Telling people how drained I am makes me feel more drained. I don't know about you. I don't know how it is for you, but the more that I tell people about my problems, I don't feel good. I don't feel good. Do you feel good telling people about your problems? I don't. I don't feel good telling people about my problems. So why am I going to do it? What a waste of my time. So I've learned by participating in these frequencies again and again and again and again and again and learning, it is just a waste of my time. Why would I waste my capacity and my consciousness on these things that I just simply don't care about? Why would I waste my time when I can just focus on something else? Yes, focus on something else. And I already hear the rebuttal. So, oh, but what if it sounds like you're running away from something? But think about it. And I understand that concern. And I get that there's a lot of people that might be watching this that feel like, oh my gosh, but if I focus on something else, what if I'm running away from something that I need to be focused on or whatever? No, you're not running away from anything. You're just getting clarity on who you want to be and what you want and what you don't want. That's it. That doesn't make you egotistical. That makes you a normal freaking person with preferences. Being a normal person with preferences and declining offers does not mean you're letting your ego run your life. In fact, quite the opposite. Letting people decide your preferences for you is ego. All right, and with that, I conclude the first lecture. I sincerely hope that this was valuable for you and it gave you something that you needed. Lecture 2 should come out in about 1 to 2 weeks, depending on when you're watching this. It may already actually be out. But yeah, leave a comment down below what you think about this lecture, and I'll see you in the next one.